Hey there guys, Alan here. So like most of you, I wasn't given early access to Andor, and I wake up really early in the morning and watch it. And wow. So the day earlier, I had read several reviews about Andor from other critics, and they had mentioned how this show had a really slow pace and it didn't feel like Star Wars. This headline from Comic Book News sums it all up. Andor review, slow, boring, and not Star Wars. The actual review isn't all that bad, but you reap what you sow when you clickbait like that. Another review from Yahoo News is titled Andor Review. This slow-moving show feels like being trapped in carbonite. Carbonite. Good word drop. It really makes you seem like a real Star Wars fan. Let me continue by reading this excerpt here. Sadly, 4 episodes into this series, there has been no exciting appearances of, say, Obi-Wan or Darth Vader to set pulses racing. I guess that's kind of a spoiler. She, like a lot of the other reviewers, got access to the first 4 episodes of the Andor series. There won't be any spoilers, by the way, in this review of the first 3 episodes of the Andor series, where I talk about what I think. These critics are right. I mean, Andor is slow, but in the same way Blade Runner was slow. And it's glorious to watch on screen. For instance, take a look at this poor bastard who has to climb up a tower every day to hammer away at a gigantic hunk of metal. This is a bell tower of some kind, and they could have clearly built in an electronic system or a mechanical system, or even hung a rope from the top of the tower that reached the ground so that this guy didn't need to climb up the stairs to ring this bell. But that's not what Andor is about. It's not about doing things easy or even the right way. It's about doing things with purpose and meaning and a heavy weight to it all. In a world where streaming services disgorge an entire season's worth of episodes in one day and pile all of their resources and budget and effort into the first episode to hook viewers into an otherwise mediocre series, Andor does the exact opposite. It is the slowest of slowest burns in a really good way. As a matter of fact, it's even slower than Blade Runner because this isn't a movie, it's a TV series. Have you guys ever gotten into a novel or book series and then seen the movie version of that story and become extremely disappointed by how rushed and hurried things feel and how your favorite scenes are missing? And then you realize it's not the director's fault. Well, not completely. It's actually the format that's the problem. Movies last 2 hours, 3 at most, and while movies can tell deep and moving stories, they'll never be as rich as even the most simplest novels, simply because of the time invested into it by the audience and also the writer. In many ways, TV series follow novels a lot closer than they do movies. Instead of one long continuous story, you have chapters. Just like a book, you usually don't finish a TV series in one sitting. I mean, you could if you really wanted to, but it's designed to take breaks so that you can sit down and reflect and think about what you just read. The longer format takes its time and allows you to slowly soak in the world and the characters, and this can provide the richest of experiences. It's simply an art form with a higher ceiling and better chance of moving the viewer. But only if it's done well. And holy crap, Andor excels at everything. The cinematography, the music, the world and characters, the clothing and ships. It's all wrapped into one beautiful, consistent story, theme, and package. It's almost as if Disney finally decided to make something good instead of something that will just sell. And perhaps that's because Disney finally realized something, and that's that the Star Wars saga, the existing content that people all love and adore, does not belong to them anymore. Well, maybe it never belonged to them in the first place. Because the Skywalker saga first came out almost half a century ago. It had hundreds and thousands of entries that followed it, and the fans have long claimed ownership over the Star Wars saga. Whatever Disney does in that framework will offend and deviate from fan expectations. And that is the beauty of Star Wars, how much people care for the galaxy far, far away. This is the franchise's biggest boon, and it's also its biggest curse. And so when individuals like J.J. Abrams approach the helm groveling about how much they love Star Wars, or when Padawans like Filoni, who was mentored by George Lucas himself, carefully tiptoes around the lore like it's holy scripture.
I never felt that Star Wars is something that was mine. I felt privileged to be a part of telling the story. I felt grateful that I got to do it with George.
It's no surprise that their films and TV shows feel more like fan films than actual new entries into the franchise. What they make are interesting and entertaining and good, but there's always been a ceiling, in my opinion, to their work. And I think a lot of you guys have sensed that. One of the greatest writers in the Star Wars Expanded Universe was Timothy Zahn. He was the individual who sold so many books with his Thrawn trilogy that George Lucas actually took note and decided it was profitable to make the beloved prequels. Timothy Zahn didn't mimic Lucas. Instead, he created something that was very much in his own style and fashion. Thrawn was the opposite of the Jedi and the Sith. He was completely calculating, cold, and more importantly, he came from beyond, in the unknown region. He created an entirely new place and part of lore to explore. Timothy Zahn didn't mimic Star Wars. He added to Star Wars, and he made the franchise a lot richer, both in financial and lore sense and artistic sense. And so when I heard that Tony Gilroy admitted to not being a Star Wars fan, I was actually cautiously optimistic. I knew about his previous endeavors like the Bourne series and Michael Clayton. I knew about his tendency as a writer and filmmaker to create irresistibly interesting and morally complex characters. His fingerprints are all over Rogue One, which is widely hailed as the greatest Star Wars film in the Disney era. And that was a film that encountered production nightmare and almost wasn't completed because of the relatively inexperienced director Gareth Edwards. Tony Gilroy actually co-wrote the screenplay, and he had to step in the last minute to reshoot some final scenes apparently to make the entire movie make sense. And still, despite all of that, this is still, again, Star Wars' best movie in the Disney era. And now Tony Gilroy returns to shoot the backstory of what is a relatively minor character in larger Star Wars lore, and was just one of the main characters from Rogue One. I would have loved to sit in on that story pitch meeting. I mean, this is so uncharacteristic of this evil mega corporation that is Disney. I gotta stop saying that or else they're never gonna show me the movies early. But anyway, I'm pleasantly surprised they went for this. Disney's giving me hope once again, I guess. I admit, even when I heard that they were doing an Andor series, I was really perplexed. I mean, yeah, Rogue One did well, and it makes sense to spin something off of that, but why not make it about someone more interesting? About a character everyone loves, like Shiruten Baze, or Jyn Erso, or Saw Gerrera. They surely can serve as better subject matter. Heck, even Bodhi Rook, the escaped Imperial pilot, could have a more interesting backstory. But no, they chose the sulky Cassian Andor, an individual so flat and dead as a character that the only time he shows any sign of life is when he signs up for a suicide mission at the end of the film. By all accounts, Cassian Andor as a character is an empty vessel. But then it hit me. Empty vessels are like the blank canvases that artists do their best work on. And giving an empty vessel to someone like Tony Gilroy is an amazing thing that I never expected Star Wars to do. And when Tony Gilroy approaches Andor, he doesn't just slap paint all over the place in a flurry like he's trying to rush to the end. Instead, he slowly and meticulously starts forming shapes and shades on the screen. He begins to slowly reveal the world that Cassian Andor lives in and breathes in. We begin to understand the situation he faces in. And much of this is done through the masterful use of show don't tell. In an age where audiences have seen every trick and gimmick, going back to the basics of storytelling with such skill is awe-inspiring. The director, Toby Haynes, who I admit I've never heard of, also keeps the acting and the dialogue very tight. The characters, even the ones in the background, are meticulously directed to convey a foreboding sense of unease that permeates every corner of this terrible part of the galaxy. There's no corniness, there's almost zero fan service, there's barely any Easter eggs. I think I saw like one Y-Wing in a scrapyard. There are also no Vespa gangs or poorly shot chase sequences that try to create action and drama where there's none. Admittedly, the story that's being told in the first few episodes is relatively bland and lacks the epicness of previous entries into the Star Wars universe, as many reviewers have mentioned. But that's actually perfectly fine, because it's not about the story so much as how the story is being told, because every small moment you see, every otherwise minor death you witness feels more impactful and emotional than even the most epic deaths and moments in a poorly made TV series. And that's because the people who made this beautiful TV show are serious about what they're doing. This isn't just for entertainment. This isn't a fan film or a film just for kids. It's a Tony Gilroy story stretched out into 24 glorious episodes. It's a novel in cinematic form. It's the kind of meticulous, realistic, and careful treatment that the Star Wars galaxy has always deserved. Which is why I'm not surprised at all they already greenlit this show for a second season before they even released the first episode. Disney's executives finally have created a TV series for the core audience. Not the casual fan who just goes to the theater whenever the trilogy films are out and knows about just Luke and, Yoda. I'm talking about the hardcore fans who, in between those trilogy films, will be on YouTube looking at lore videos made by other random Star Wars fans. I'm talking about the kids who first watched the original trilogy or prequels a decade ago and now are old enough to have their own kids to introduce to the franchise. Finally, Star Wars has caught up and also matured with its core audience. And I think this is something that is really just wonderful. Because I'll be honest, after Kenobi, after the Book of Boba Fett series, I was like, maybe I won't be doing this YouTube stuff anymore because I'm not like the other guys who are gonna scream Star Wars is dying every time something bad comes out. But man. This is a great series. I don't even know why you're still watching me. Go check this out if you haven't seen it already. And also stay tuned because there's gonna be a lot of content coming out about this. I haven't been this excited for Star Wars since The Force Awakens came out. All right, see you next time.